My name is Angela. At 38, I thought I'd figured life out, stable career as a consultant, a decade of marriage, and a home I loved. But looking back, I was just a professional at ignoring my own gut. The day it all crumbled started far too quiet. I came home early, expecting a nap, but instead, I heard a sound that turned my blood to ice. My best friend's laughter coming from my husband's side of the bed. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't even catch my breath. I just reached for the key, locked that bedroom door from the outside, and finally let the truth sink in. Within 15 minutes, I called the one person Daniel feared more than God. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends, because the look on their faces when that door finally opened was worth every year of lies. I didn't return home early that Tuesday because of a canceled flight or a stroke of luck. I returned because of a whispered tip that confirmed the gnawing suspicion I'd been suppressing. As I stepped into the foyer of our suburban home, the silence felt heavy, broken only by a muffled, intimate giggle echoing from the master suite upstairs. It was a sound I knew well, the laughter of Rebecca, the woman I had called my best friend for 20 years. Instead of the frantic, tearful confrontation, most would expect a strange, icy calm washed over me. I walked up the stairs with measured steps, reached for the heavy oak door of our bedroom, and pulled it shut. With a sharp, final click, I turned the key in the lock, effectively transforming our sanctuary into a cage. In that moment, I wasn't a victim, I was a strategist. While Daniel and Rebecca began to scramble behind the door, their voices rising in a mixture of confusion and sudden terror, I methodically pulled out my phone. I didn't use it to call them out. I used it to document the reality. I activated the camera, recording the time, the date, and the undeniable sounds of their frantic pleas as legal evidence. Every thump on the door was just another data point for the inevitable fallout. I ignored their begging and dialed Marcus, my attorney. My voice was clinical, devoid of the tremors of a broken heart. We didn't talk about betrayal. We talked about the adultery clause in my prenuptial agreement. To me, this wasn't the end of a romance. It was a significant breach of contract that triggered a very specific pre-planned legal sequence. Sitting there on the top step, waiting for my legal team to arrive, I felt a wave of relief so profound it startled me. I realized then that the warmth in my marriage had died years ago. The lock on the door was simply the formal closing of a grave. As the doorbell finally rang, I realized my marriage won't end with a broken heart. It will end with a meticulously filed lawsuit. My mind drifted back to 3 months ago when the first real cracks began to show in Daniel's carefully constructed facade. He had started pressuring me to sell our estate, spinning a story about tax optimization, and moving to Florida to secure our retirement. It was a pitch delivered with the practiced polish of a salesman. Around the same time, Rebecca started appearing more frequently, rebranding herself as an informal financial consultant. She seemed far more interested in the details of my personal investment portfolio than any market trends. My intuition screamed when I discovered $60,000 missing from our joint account, but Daniel brushed it off as a high-yield strategy for our future. He thought he was gaslighting me, but he was actually just providing me with a reason to look closer. Weeks before I turned that key in the lock, I had already hired a forensic accountant to trace the scent of that missing money. The investigation unmasked a paper trail leading directly to a ghost LLC co-owned by Daniel and Rebecca. They weren't just having a sordid affair. They were siphoning our marital assets to build a life together after they planned to leave me behind. This discovery changed the game entirely. Daniel wasn't just a cheater. He was a thief attempting to commit marital asset diversion on a grand scale. The deepest pain, however, came from an 8-year-old memory I had buried deep, a vague, flirtatious email I'd once found and chosen to ignore for the sake of stability. Looking back, I realized I had stayed in this house far longer than I should have. What Daniel never suspected was that I had started building my own fortress 3 years ago. Under the guise of professional liability protection, I had moved 70% of our family's wealth into a private, irrevocable trust. That move effectively isolated my legacy from any claims he could make in a divorce. I also recalled the infidelity and financial fraud clause I had insisted on including in our prenup years ago. Now that clause dictated a total forfeiture of the assets he thought he was entitled to. The power dynamic in the hallway shifted the second Marcus arrived and handed me the freeze order for all of Daniel's known accounts. When the bedroom door was finally opened under the supervision of my legal team, Daniel emerged looking disheveled, but his expression wasn't one of remorse, it was one of calculated defense. That defense crumbled the moment he saw the documents in Marcus's hand. He hadn't just lost his wife and his secret life, he had lost the financial engine that powered his greed. What made Daniel turn pale wasn't the divorce papers, it was the notification that his Ghost LLC was now under the control of my legal team. In those messages, he didn't speak of Rebecca with love or even lust. He described her as perfect leverage because of her impulsivity and her documented history of disruptive behavior. He had chosen her with the cold-blooded intent of using her as a human shield. The evidence revealed that his grand design was to liquidate every asset I possessed, funnel the proceeds into that secret LLC, and then vanish, leaving Rebecca to face the mounting legal liabilities and the inevitable fallout alone. I realized that his betrayal wasn't a personal indictment of me or our marriage, but simply a manifestation of his nature. He was a man who hunted within his own home, and for the first time, I understood that I wasn't the only woman being hunted in this house. 4 months into the grueling proceedings, the hunter found herself face to face with the other prey. Rebecca reached out to me requesting a secret meeting in a quiet, secluded corner of a local park. When I saw her, the woman who had once been my closest confidant looked like a hollowed-out version of herself. Daniel had already begun his final act, siphoning funds out of their shared startup and leaving her name on every debt and every fraudulent contract. She had finally seen the emails my lawyers had strategically leaked through intermediaries, the proof that the man she thought she loved was planning to abandon her in the wreckage. Our conversation wasn't the typical confrontation between a wife and a mistress. There were no screams or accusations, only a clinical exchange of information between two survivors of the same predator. I looked into her tired eyes and told her a truth I had learned the hard way: patterns don't change, they just find new witnesses. I offered her a single path to salvation. She could either sink with Daniel as a co-conspirator or provide the final piece of evidence regarding his offshore accounts in exchange for legal immunity. Without a word, she reached into her bag and handed over a USB drive containing the hidden financial logs Daniel had kept as his own insurance policy. I felt a grim, quiet satisfaction watching the truth finally dismantle the mountain of lies he had spent a decade building around us both. I still had one final decision to make, and this time, it had nothing to do with Daniel. The final mediation session was held in a sterile glass-walled conference room that felt more like a courtroom than a negotiation table. Daniel's lawyers, sensing the impending total collapse of their case, began to plead for a private settlement. They were desperate to protect his professional reputation and his standing in the community, offering me a significantly larger portion of the remaining liquid assets if I would only sign an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. Daniel sat across from me, his face a mask of practiced humility, still believing he could trade money for the right to keep his image intact and start his next hunt with a clean slate. I looked at him feeling the full weight of the 10 years I had given him, and I refused. I told him that privacy protects a reputation, but truth protects dignity. I chose the public record over the extra payout, forcing him to sign a full confession of his financial misconduct as part of the final decree. This was his social death sentence, ensuring that no financial institution would ever trust him with a dime again. The victory was absolute. I retained the house my trust remained untouched, and Daniel was ordered to cover every cent of my legal fees with the very last of his available cash. The room was silent as he signed away his pride, the only sound being the scratch of the pen on the paper. 1 year has passed since that door finally opened for the last time. I sold the suburban house that held so many shadows and moved into a vibrant city apartment filled with light and new memories. My life is no longer a series of risks to be managed. It is a life to be lived. I hear through mutual acquaintances that Daniel is drifting through low-level administrative jobs his credit ruined and his legendary charm failing him because the world finally knows who he is. I feel no joy in his struggle, only the quiet confirmation that character is eventually destiny. I have used a portion of my settlement to launch a foundation dedicated to financial and legal literacy for women, helping others find the voice I almost lost. I am no longer just a consultant. I am a mentor surrounded by genuine friendships and the luxury of an intuition I never have to doubt again. Tonight, as I host a small dinner for the people who stood by me, I look at the empty space where a decade of lies once sat and I smile. The betrayal didn't break me. It acted as the catalyst for the most authentic version of my life, proving that starting over is the greatest revenge of all. If Angela's story of reclaiming her power resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel to join a community of strong, resilient women who refuse to be silenced. We believe that sharing these journeys helps others find their own strength, and we want to hear from you. Do you think Angela was right to choose public truth over a larger private settlement? Would you have been able to keep your composure like she did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective adds so much value to this conversation, and we look forward to reading every single one.